OCO, my brothers and sisters, relatives, spiritual warriors, and free thinkers. In this segment, I will be covering some essential information concerning the term Moor and what it actually meant historically and now modernly. This was a highly favored request from our viewers, and apparently there is a lot of confusion that needed to be sorted out here. Those of you who in fact follow some of the religious beliefs of what I'm about to go over would not need to cover up your ears at any time during this video. This presentation is strictly served for educational purposes only, and just like all of my previous documentaries, or even those that I will soon release here, the information will not carry any biased formatted beliefs, guesses, assumptions, or opinions in any sense. So, with all of that being said, let's begin this segment with covering the biggest elephant in the room, and that is, are the people of color that resides in America today descendants of the people that were once described as Moors? Now, the answer to this question depends on which of the two very important key factors in regards to this question that an individual subscribes to. These two factors are based upon what an individual believes by way of their personal faith in various religious doctrines, or what an individual knows by way of what they could actually prove realistically. And here's what I mean by that. According to the 1828 Webster's English Language Dictionary, it defines the word belief as, quote, a persuasion of the truth, further stating that belief is, quote, a word that is used for persuasion or opinion when the evidence is not so clear as to leave no doubt. But the shades of strength in opinion can hardly be defined or exemplified, hence the use of qualifying words as a firm, full, or strong belief, end quote. Now, this is very essential to note when decoding any and all presented information that was given to you as if it is truthful, because the term persuasion has a manipulative construct that is typically not based on any logical grounds or even empirical evidence for that matter. According to the 6th edition of the book entitled Persuasion, Social Influence and Compliance Gaining, authors Robert Gass and John Cedar stated that the term persuasion is, quote, an attempt to influence a person's beliefs, attitudes, intentions, motivations, or behaviors. So if the term persuasion also carries a negative connotation when referring to the English definition of the word belief, then that should make you question if what you were taught to believe in, especially if it's not yourself, carries a malevolent side to the story that is simultaneously promoted as the greatest influence in your life, regardless if any hard evidence is present or not. So my original question can be simply answered by the process of elimination, but I am aware that some of you may have a hard time digesting information versus what you are traditionally accustomed to hearing, and that's fine. So let's take a deeper dive down the rabbit hole, shall we? Some people would state that the term Moor was another word for black, and it refers to black people or African people. But here's the problem with that. There is absolutely no hard evidence that exists today that would support this heavily campaigned theory. In fact, the term Moor was vaguely used historically, and when it was done so in a descriptive sense, referring to a person predominantly of the Muslim faith or even Christian faith later on that has a dark hue of complexion and resides throughout the surrounding lands nearest the Mediterranean Sea and so forth. What is very important to note here is that dark does not necessarily mean that a person's skin complexion is literally black in color. It simply describes a person's hue as being different shades in color, which is realistically various shades of the color brown. The term Moor does not refer to just one common racial group of people of a particular country or continent, or even one particular culture for that matter. The origin of the word Moor, with having only this form of spelling, can be traced back to one of the many lingua francas that still exist today. In my previous documentary called What Language Was Used Before English Existed, I mentioned that a lingua franca takes many words and their meanings or ideas and reduces them into a simplified version that could be understood by many. Lingua franca literally means Frankish tongue, a language that is commonly spoken in Germany that eventually evolved into what is known now as Dutch. For example, this is why you would normally discover that many of the Amsterdam artists, in which the people of Amsterdam of the Netherlands speak Dutch, depicting various historic paintings of Muslims and or Muslims of various skin complexions, and even the indigenous people of the Americas, and labeling them with included descriptions that read the Moor, or American Moor, or even Blackamoor, due to their Frankish tongue or lingua franca that literally reduced many other native languages used throughout the surrounding areas during the trade era into their now more simplified primary language. This means that just because a foreign stranger gives their best reasoning behind their portraits or paintings' descriptive labeling does not mean that the person or people that are displayed in the picture called themselves what the artist made mention of, because it was merely based on the artist's perception. It is very difficult to verify what the term Moor was historically meant to describe. This is why there are many authors, researchers, and historians alike who struggle with pinpointing a conclusion that they would all agree upon when it comes to the history of this term, especially due to its vague usage. For example, According to the 1828 Webster's English Language Dictionary, a Moor is, quote, a native of the northern coast of Africa, called by the Romans from the color of the people, Mauritania, the country of dark-complexioned people. This same country is now called Morocco, Tunis, Algiers, etc. End quote. Then what's even more vague is the etymology of the term Moor, which is, quote, North African, Berber, one of the race dwelling in Barbary, inhabitant of Mauritania, Roman Northwest Africa, a region now corresponding to northern Algeria and Morocco, also applied to the Arabic conquerors of Spain, being a dark people in relation to Europeans. Their name in the Middle Ages was a synonym for Negro. Being the nearest Muslims to Western Europe, it was used indiscriminately of Muslims, Persians, Arabs, etc., but especially those in India. End quote. Now keep in mind that these people who reside in the areas that I just mentioned do not call themselves Moors. Also, they do not all speak one particular language, nor do they have the same cultures, history, or even dialects, nor do they refer to their continent as Africa, unless they are not speaking their native languages, in which this should all ring a bell here. A Lebanese college professor who was born and raised in Shimlin, Lebanon in 1886, and then migrated to America during the year of 1913 by the name of Philip Curry Hiddie, wrote a book entitled History of the Arabs that was initially published in 1937, stating, quote, the Romans called Western Africa Mauritania and its inhabitants Mori, presumably of Phoenician origin, meaning Western, whence the Spanish Moro and the English Moor. The Berbers, therefore, were the Moors proper, but the term was conventionally applied to all Muslims of the Spain and northwestern Africa. The 500,000 Muslims of the Philippines are still known by the name of Moros, given them by the Spaniards on the discovery of the islands by Magellan in 1521. End quote. So, if a person chose to subscribe to this author's narrative and extensive research as being truthful, then that means that the Romans referred to the so-called Moors as Mori, which has a historic Phoenician origin that means Western, which does not describe a people by their skin complexion nor their religious choice, but merely by their geographical location. Interesting enough. Which should make you ask some questions. Like, with this author, Philip Hiddie, being born in the ancient Phoenician city of what is now known as Lebanon, would he really know the truth? And if so, does that mean that the Phoenicians are in fact the people that will be called Moors by some of you today? And if you didn't already notice, there is no pre-existing records or documentation that indicates some form of a great migrational period of any of these people inhabiting the areas that I just mentioned, immigrating to anywhere throughout the lands now commonly known as America. And with all due respect to the people that still resides in those places today that I mentioned previously, forgive my people, for they did not know how deceitful the indoctrination process of their true identities stretches far beyond their assumptions and misinterpretations that their minds could even imagine, especially throughout today's society in America. I'm just here to make you think.